My name is Cleo March, and for most of my adult life, I have lived in the quiet company of ghosts. Not the spectral kind that haunt old houses, but the ghosts of artists, the faint, lingering trace of their hands in a brushstroke, the echo of their choices in a pigment, the silent stories embedded in canvas and wood. I am an art conservator. I spend my days under the focused glow of magnification lamps in a sterile, climate-controlled studio in Atlanta, patiently mending the wounds of time. It's a delicate, solitary profession, one of reverence and near invisibility. You are successful when your own hand disappears completely, leaving only the original work, whole and vibrant, as if untouched. It is a life I chose, a life I love, but one that has always been difficult to explain to my family. The call came on a Tuesday, the air outside my studio window thick with the promise of a Georgia spring. My mother's voice was a familiar blend of brisk efficiency and faint, underlying anxiety. "Cleo, darling, I hope we're not interrupting anything important." The royal "we," as always, meant her and my father, a united front in all matters concerning their children. "Hi, Mom. It's a good time. I was just cleaning some brushes." "Wonderful. Now, about this weekend. You have the invitation, of course. For Audra's party. The firm is pulling out all the stops, a full gala at the Regent Hotel. She's officially the youngest partner in the firm's history, you know." "I know, Mom. It's amazing. I'm so proud of her." "We all are," she said, her tone shifting, becoming more pointed. "Which is why it's so important that this weekend is perfect for her. Cleo, this is Audra's moment. I need you to just be there. Smile, be supportive, and let your sister have the spotlight. That's all we're asking." The words, though gentle, landed like small, smooth stones in my stomach. A familiar weight. I pictured my father, Arthur, standing near her, nodding in agreement, his mind already on the impressive roster of guests who would be attending: judges, executives, the city's old money elite. For them, success was a tangible, audible thing, a title, a corner office, a figure on a year-end bonus. My work, with its quiet dedication and results that were measured in millimeters and shades of ochre, was a foreign language. "Of course, Mom," I said, my voice even. "I wouldn't dream of doing anything else." "Good. And darling? Please, wear the blue dress we saw last spring. Not one of your work smocks." She laughed, a light, tinkling sound that didn't quite mask the plea. I hung up the phone and looked around my studio. On the easel before me was a 17th-century Dutch landscape, its sky clouded by a century of accumulated grime and a clumsy, yellowed varnish applied in a previous, less skilled restoration. My job was to slowly, painstakingly, remove that obscuring layer and reveal the luminous, original sky beneath. For a moment, the irony was so sharp it almost made me smile. My whole life, it seemed, was about revealing the beauty hidden under layers of misunderstanding. The 3-hour drive from Atlanta to my hometown of Port Blossom, South Carolina, was a journey through time. The landscape slowly softened from urban sprawl to sprawling live oaks draped in Spanish moss, their branches creating cathedral-like arches over the road. Port Blossom was a city preserved in amber, with its cobblestone streets, pastel-hued historic homes, and the salty scent of the sea clinging to everything. It was beautiful, but for me, it was also a place of carefully preserved roles, where I was always cast as the quiet, artistic, slightly bewildering younger sister to the brilliant and dazzling Audra. I'd gotten used to it, the way one gets used to a trick knee or a room with poor light. I'd learned to make myself small, to fit into the spaces they left for me, to never mention the accolades or the publications in obscure academic journals that my parents wouldn't understand anyway. They believed I'd left a promising path in art history at a prestigious university to pursue what my father once called, with dismissive affection, my little mending projects. They didn't know the truth, that I had been headhunted by one of the world's leading conservation institutes, that my mending projects were often priceless masterpieces, and that my work was so specialized it required a level of security and confidentiality they associated with state secrets, not art. As I pulled into the familiar driveway of my childhood home, a grand but welcoming house with a sprawling veranda, I could see my father's silhouette in the window. He was on the phone, no doubt finalizing some detail for the party. My mother was probably arranging flowers with the same focus she applied to a legal brief. I took a deep breath, collecting myself. Show up. Smile. Let your sister shine. For one weekend, I would be the frame, not the picture. That was the plan, at least. The house hummed with a nervous energy, a frequency I recognized from every major family event. The air smelled of lemon oil and my mother's signature baked brie, a scent that was both comforting and laced with the pressure of performance. My mother, Eleanor, met me at the door, her hug brief and evaluative. She smoothed the collar of my shirt, her eyes scanning my simple travel attire. "Cleo, you made it. Traffic wasn't too dreadful," she asked, already turning toward the dining room where she was arranging place cards for a pre-party family dinner. "Your room is all ready for you. I laid out the blue dress on your bed. It's much more appropriate for the hotel, don't you think?" "It's beautiful, Mom." "Thank you." I placed my weekend bag at the bottom of the grand, curving staircase, my sneakers leaving a faint dusting of highway grime on the polished heart pine floors. My brother, Owen, loped past, carrying a case of champagne. He gave me a quick, one-armed hug, his smile easy and genuine. "Hey, Cleo. Glad you're here." He was the family's gentle buffer, a landscape architect who'd found a way to exist peacefully in the space between Audra's ambition and my quiet retreat. He floated above the tensions, kind but largely unaware of the undercurrents that pulled at me. I felt a familiar pang of being both present and absent, a guest in the rooms that held all my childhood memories. As I headed upstairs, I heard my father's voice, deep and resonant, coming from his study. "Yes, the mayor's office confirmed. Judge Albright will be at our table. Audra will be thrilled." His pride was a palpable force in the house, a warm, directed beam that had always shone most brightly on my sister. My old bedroom was a museum of the girl I used to be. The walls were a soft, pale green I'd chosen when I was 15. A few charcoal sketches I'd done in college were still tacked to a corkboard, but the prime space on the bookshelf was now occupied by a framed photo of Audra shaking hands with the governor, and another of Owen standing proudly beside a garden he'd designed that had won a regional award. My own accomplishments were invisible here, as they were everywhere else in this house. My life in Atlanta, the hushed importance of my studio, the weight of the history I held in my hands each day, it all felt like a dream I'd had, one that faded in the bright, confident light of my family's world. I sat on the edge of the familiar four-poster bed and touched the silk of the blue dress. It was lovely, but it felt like a costume for a role I was tired of playing. A text message vibrated on my phone. It was Audra. "Almost done at the office. Don't be late for dinner. And please try to mingle tomorrow night. I know you hate it, but it means a lot to Mom and Dad. No, can't wait to see you. No, thanks for driving all this way. Just instructions." Audra, the consummate manager of people and expectations, even mine. I typed a reply, then deleted it. What was there to say that hadn't been left unsaid for a decade? I had learned in my work that the most profound transformations happen in silence, through patience and quiet attention. I wondered, not for the first time, if the same could be true for a family. Later, as the evening settled in, the house fell into a comfortable rhythm. I could hear Owen and my father laughing over a baseball game in the den, my mother humming in the kitchen. I lay in bed, listening to the familiar chorus of my family's life, a melody in which my part had long ago been reduced to a few quiet, sustained notes. I closed my eyes and allowed myself to drift back to a time before the silence set in, before Audra's star began its dazzling ascent and mine seemed to fade from view. I wondered if any of them ever missed the intense, passionate girl who used to fill sketchbooks with ferocious drawings, who believed art could save the world. Or perhaps they had simply forgotten her. Tomorrow, I would play my part. I would be the supportive sister, the quiet daughter, the placeholder in the family portrait. Tomorrow, I would let Audra shine. The morning of the party broke clear and bright, the port blossom sun casting long, gentle shadows through the Spanish moss. The atmosphere at breakfast was thick with a kind of festive tension. Audra had arrived late the night before and was now holding court at the kitchen table, looking effortlessly chic in tailored linen trousers and a silk blouse, a crystal glass of freshly squeezed orange juice in her hand. Her phone buzzed intermittently on the polished granite countertop, a steady rhythm of importance. My father was reading excerpts from the firm's press release about her promotion, his voice swelling with pride. Audra March's formidable litigation skills and unwavering dedication have made her an invaluable asset. They really captured her, didn't they, Eleanor? My mother, hovering nearby with a plate of scones, beamed. They certainly did. She's earned every word. Audra smiled, a practiced, modest tilt of her lips. She caught my eye as I poured myself a cup of coffee. Morning, Cleo. Sleep well. Like a log, I lied, managing a small smile. You must be so excited for tonight. It's a lot, she said, gesturing vaguely with her glass. More about the firm's image than anything else. But it'll be a good night. She turned back to her phone, her attention already consumed by an incoming email. The brief connection was severed. I took my coffee and stood by the window overlooking the garden, feeling the familiar sensation of being on the periphery. Owen joined me, nudging my shoulder gently. Big night, huh? You'll be a good sport about all the boring lawyer talk, right? I'm an expert at it, I said, and he laughed, not catching the double meaning. Before we left for the hotel, my mother performed her customary inspection. She adjusted the delicate strap of my blue dress, tucked a stray wisp of hair behind my ear, and stepped back, her head tilted. Her expression was complicated, a mixture of approval and a kind of wistful confusion, as if she were looking at a painting she'd once known by heart but could no longer quite decipher. You look lovely, Cleo, she said, her voice softer than usual. Just lovely. The Regent Hotel was the crown jewel of Port Blossom's historic district, a bastion of old-world opulence with soaring ceilings, crystal chandeliers, and floors of black and white marble. The ballroom was already filling with a sea of dark suits and elegant gowns. The air vibrated with muted conversation and the clinking of champagne flutes. I felt a wave of social vertigo, a desire to shrink into the damask wallpaper. For the first hour, I was a ghost. I drifted at the edge of the crowd, nursing a glass of sparkling water, a serene smile fixed on my face. I watched my family work the room. My father, expansive and proud, introducing Audra to a senator. My mother, a gracious hostess, chatting with the wives of other partners. And Audra. Audra was incandescent. She moved through the crowd with a liquid grace, her laughter bright and confident, shaking hands, accepting congratulations, radiating a light that was impossible to ignore. She was born for this. At one point, she pulled me into a circle of her colleagues. Everyone, I'd like you to meet my sister, Cleo. The introduction hung in the air, unfinished. A man with a kind smile and tired eyes turned to me. A pleasure. Audra is a force of nature. What is it you do, Cleo? Before I could answer, Audra jumped in, her tone light and affectionate. Oh, Cleo's our family's artist. She lives a wonderfully quiet life in Atlanta. She restores old paintings. It's very meticulous work. She meant it as a compliment, a way of framing my life as something quaint and charming. But the words landed like a dismissal. The man nodded politely, his interest already fading. How fascinating, he said, before the conversation was swept away by a new arrival. I excused myself and retreated to a quiet alcove near a towering floral arrangement. I wasn't angry, not really. It was just the same old story, the same faded print. Audra didn't mean to diminish me, she simply couldn't conceive of my world having the same weight or significance as hers. In her universe, power was loud. Success wore a suit and carried a briefcase. My quiet, patient, vital work had no place in that lexicon. I was watching my sister laugh with a group by the grand piano when I noticed a man staring at me from across the room. He was older, impeccably dressed in a tailored tuxedo, with a shock of silver hair and eyes that were sharp and intelligent. He looked familiar, but I couldn't place him. He began to make his way through the crowd, his path steady and direct, aimed right at me. My first instinct was to look away, to melt back into the shadows. But I held his gaze. As he drew closer, I recognized him. Mr. Sterling Croft. A titan of industry, a notorious philanthropist, and, most importantly, one of the world's most discerning art collectors. He was also a major, long-standing client of my sister's firm. My parents were standing just a few feet away, deep in conversation with another couple. Mr. Croft stopped in front of me, a broad, genuine smile lighting up his face. "I knew it was you," he said, his voice a low, cultured baritone that carried easily over the din. "Forgive me for staring, but I couldn't believe my eyes. Cleo March in the flesh." I felt a blush creep up my neck. "Mr. Croft, it's an honor to meet you in person." "The honor is all mine, my dear," he boomed, taking my hand. "I followed your work on the Rijksmuseum's Vermeer with breathless anticipation. The papers called it a miracle of conservation. To bring that light back from the brink, truly masterful. You have a gift that is beyond measure." A small circle of silence had formed around us. I could feel the conversation my parents were having stutter to a halt. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw my father turn, his expression one of utter bewilderment. My mother's polite social smile was frozen on her face. "You're too kind, sir," I murmured. "I was just part of a team." "Nonsense," he declared. "The lead conservator is the conductor of the orchestra. Everyone knows your name in my world, Miss March. You are a legend." Before I could respond, another voice cut through the charged air. "I knew I'd find you holding court, Sterling." A tall, elegant man with a warm, academic air approached our small group. I felt my breath catch in my throat. It was Dr. Julian Hayes, the director of the National Gallery of Art in Washington, D.C. A man I deeply respected and had corresponded with for years, but had only met twice. He was a luminary, a giant in my field. "Julian." Mr. Croft greeted him. "What on earth are you doing in Port Blossom?" Dr. Hayes's eyes found mine, and they crinkled at the corners in a warm smile. "I was speaking at the university today, and I heard a rumor that one of my favorite miracle workers might be in town. I couldn't pass up the chance to say hello." He turned his full attention to me, his expression one of profound respect. The ambient noise of the party seemed to fade into a distant hum. I was vaguely aware of Audra approaching, her confident stride faltering slightly as she took in the scene. "Cleo," Dr. Hayes said, his voice resonating with quiet authority. "I was just at a conference in Florence. Your name came up a dozen times. The work you did on the Da Vinci sketch, the one damaged in the fire? People are still talking about it. The techniques you pioneered for stabilizing the carbonized paper, you didn't just save a piece of history. You wrote a new chapter in the science of conservation. Most people see a beautiful drawing restored to its former glory. What I see is a level of genius and dedication that comes along once in a generation." He looked around, seeming to notice my stunned family for the first time. He extended a hand to my father. "You must be Mr. March. You should be incredibly proud of your daughter. Her quiet work in that Atlanta studio is having an impact that will echo in museums and galleries for the next 100 years." My father took his hand, his grip slack, his mouth slightly agape. He looked from the celebrated museum director to me, his daughter, the quiet one who mended things. The carefully constructed narrative of our family, the one where Audra was the sun and I was a pale, distant moon, had just been shattered by a light so bright, so undeniable, that no one could look away. The applause in the ballroom had been for Audra, for her name newly lettered in gold on the firm's mahogany door. But in that moment, in the stunned silence that followed Dr. Hayes's words, a different kind of recognition filled the space around me. It wasn't applause, it was something quieter, heavier. It was the sound of a story being irrevocably revised. Audra stood frozen a few feet away, her champagne flute held halfway to her lips. The triumphant glow she had worn all evening had been replaced by a mask of pale, dawning shock. Her colleagues, the partners, the judges, they were all looking at me, then at her, then back at me, the quiet sister who is suddenly, inexplicably, a legend. The spell was broken by Mr. Croft, who clapped my father on the shoulder. "Well, Arthur, you've been hiding your light under a bushel. 2 such brilliant daughters. What are the odds?" My father, for the first time in my memory, seemed at a complete loss for words. He simply nodded, a slow, mechanical movement, his eyes still fixed on me as if trying to solve an impossible puzzle. Who was this person in the familiar blue dress? Audra finally found her voice. She walked toward me, her movements stiff, her public smile gone, leaving her face vulnerable and uncertain. She stopped right in front of me, her gaze searching mine. "Cleo," she whispered, the sound barely audible over the renewed chatter of the party. "Why? Why didn't you ever tell us?" Her question wasn't an accusation. It was a genuine, painful inquiry. It held the weight of a dozen Christmases where they'd asked politely about my hobby, of countless phone calls where she detailed her courtroom victories while I'd said my work was fine. I looked at my sister, at the woman I had both loved and resented, the person whose shadow I had learned to live in. And for the first time, I saw not a rival, but someone who had been reading from a different script all along. "It wasn't a secret, Audra," I said, my voice gentle but clear. "It was just quiet. My world is quiet. You can't describe the colors of a restored Titian in an email. You can't quantify the feeling of saving something beautiful from being lost forever on a spreadsheet. I did the work because I loved it, because it mattered to me. It was never about the recognition." Her eyes filled with a film of tears, which she blinked back fiercely. "I spent so long," she started, then stopped, shaking her head. "I thought I was the one setting the pace. I was so proud of being the one who made it. Turns out, I was just making the most noise." There was no victory in her admission, only a profound and aching sadness. The gulf between us, carved out by years of assumptions and unspoken comparisons, was suddenly laid bare for us both to see. The rest of the evening passed in a surreal haze. People came up to me, their curiosity piqued. They asked questions, their tone now filled with a respect that had been absent before. I answered them simply, deflecting the praise, feeling an odd sense of detachment from the commotion I had inadvertently caused. I was still the same person I had been 2 hours before. The only thing that had changed was the perception of others. As the party wound down, my father approached me while I was waiting for my wrap. He stood beside me, not speaking for a long moment, just staring at the intricate pattern on the hotel carpet. "Dr. Hayes," he began, his voice raspy. "He said your work will echo for 100 years. He finally looked at me, and in his eyes, I saw something I hadn't seen since I was a little girl who believed her father knew everything: confusion. I always measured success by the things you can see right away. A promotion, a headline, a new car in the driveway." He sighed, a heavy, weary sound. "I don't think I ever asked you the right questions, Cleo." I'm not sure I even knew what to ask. It was the most honest thing he had ever said to me. It wasn't an apology, not exactly, but it was a crack in the wall that had stood between us for so long. "Maybe," I said softly, "you can just start now." He put a hand on my shoulder, his grip firm and warm. "Drive safe, kiddo." The drive back to Atlanta the next day felt different. The road was the same, but I was lighter. The silent weight of being misunderstood, a burden I had carried for so long I'd forgotten it was there, had been lifted. It wasn't the public praise that had freed me. It was the truth, finally allowed into the light. It was the look in my father's eyes, the raw confusion on my sister's face. It was the end of a long, quiet performance. When I walked into my apartment, the late afternoon sun was streaming through the large windows, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. My quiet, orderly space felt like a sanctuary. I sank onto my sofa, the silence a welcome balm. My phone chimed. A text from my mother. "Home safe?" Just 2 words, but they felt different. They felt like she was actually asking about me. A few moments later, another message appeared. It was from Audra. I was an idiot. "I'm so sorry. Can we have coffee this week? On your turf. I want to hear about everything. For real this time." I stared at the screen, a slow smile spreading across my face. It was just a start. A crack in the varnish. But I knew, with the patience of a restorer, that with enough care and gentle work, what lay beneath could be brought back to life. A week later, I was sitting across from Audra in a small, sunlit cafe near my studio. She wore jeans and a simple sweater, no trace of the power suit or the polished lawyer. She looked younger, more like the sister I remembered from our shared childhood. There was an awkwardness at first, a fumbling for a new language between us. So she began, stirring her latte with unnecessary vigor. Tell me about the Da Vinci sketch. The one Dr. Hayes mentioned. And so I told her. I described the fragility of the scorched paper, the smell of the fire still clinging to it, the painstaking process of humidifying and flattening the fibers. I talked about the chemistry of the ink, the way I had to build a custom housing just to support the piece while I worked. As I spoke, I saw a new kind of respect dawning in her eyes, not for a title or an accolade, but for the work itself. For the passion. Wow, she said when I finished, her voice soft. All these years, I thought your work was, I don't know, a retreat. A way to hide from the world. She looked down at her hands. I think I was the one who was hiding. It's easier to focus on climbing a ladder when you don't have to think about what you're leaving behind. We talked for 2 hours. We didn't solve everything. The habits of a lifetime don't vanish over a single cup of coffee. But we cleared away some of the debris. We found a small patch of solid ground on which to build something new. As we left, she gave me a real hug, not the stiff, formal embrace of family obligation, but a hug that said, I see you. Finally. Things began to shift after that, slowly and subtly, like a landscape changing with the seasons. My phone calls with my parents became less about Audra's latest triumph and more like actual conversations. My father started sending me articles he'd find about art auctions or new museum exhibits, followed by a text. Thought you'd find this interesting. It was his way of trying to learn my language. A few months later, a package arrived from Audra. Inside was a small, exquisitely framed archival print of the Vermeer I had restored at the Rijksmuseum. The note attached was simple, so I never forget what real light looks like. All my love, A. I hung it on the wall in my living room, a daily reminder that it's never too late to be seen. One crisp autumn Sunday, my parents and Owen drove to Atlanta to take me out for lunch. We sat at a bustling bistro, the conversation flowing more easily than it had in years. My father asked me about my current project, a delicate medieval manuscript, with genuine, unforced curiosity. My mother wanted to hear about my life in the city, my friends, my favorite park. It wasn't perfect. There were still moments of stilted silence, old dynamics that tried to resurface. But we were trying. We were all trying. As we stood on the sidewalk saying our goodbyes, my father pulled me into a hug. We should do this more often, Cleo, he said, his voice thick with an emotion he rarely showed. And for the first time, I knew he meant it. My life didn't change dramatically on the surface. I still spent my days in the quiet company of my ghosts, mending the wounds of time. But I no longer felt like a ghost myself. The space I occupied in my family and in my own heart had solidified. I had learned that my value wasn't contingent on my visibility. My work had always mattered. My passion had always been valid, whether anyone else understood it or not. The change was not in me, but in their ability to see. I had spent my career restoring masterpieces, believing that my greatest skill was in making my own presence disappear. But I came to realize that the most important restoration project of my life was my own, finding my place in the frame, allowing my own light to show, not by outshining anyone else, but by simply refusing to be painted over.